Hello friends! The 611th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. The main intensity of the fighting remains near Avdiivka, but the intensity of the assaults has decreased due to the weather, the head of the city administration Barabash said yesterday. The weather makes it almost impossible for Russians to use drones. Although, according to Barabash, the overall situation remains difficult, shelling of the city continues day and night. Already today, the head of the Avdiivka city administration said that in the city, due to the escalation of fighting and constant shelling, shops are closing and the delivery of humanitarian aid has temporarily stopped. However, according to him, the city has reserves of food, hygiene products and medical supplies which will last for 2 to 2.5 months. Nothing has changed in the reports of the Ukrainian General Staff on Avdiivka. All Russian attacks have been repelled. Although they do not give up attempts to surround the city. The enemy's offensive actions were unsuccessful in the areas of Stepove, Avdiivka, Tonenke, Sieverne, where the defense forces repelled 20 enemy attacks, the morning report said. In turn, from the Russian side, there were reports of a number of their successes north of Vodene and Opytne. In particular, pro-Russian Syria maps experts wrote the Russians took control of the quarry and forest areas northwest and north of Opytne, and also occupied the trenches southeast of the abandoned military base. The Ukrainian telegram channel Deep States called this information untrue and urged not to trust what the enemy writes. At the same time, military observer Yuri Butusov pointed out that the Russian north of Avdiivka managed to advance along the railway track and occupy an area up to a kilometer wide. Thus, according to Butusov, they are trying to expand the controlled corridor and create conditions for a further offensive in the direction of Stepove, Berdychi, and in the direction of the industrial zone of the Avdiivka coke plant. This is a very serious threat that requires maximum attention. The enemy hopes to gain a foothold in the factory buildings and gain a springboard for entering the city. South of Avdiivka, Russian troops continue attacks with the aim of capturing a sand quarry in the area of the village of Opytne, writes Butusov. My friends, the robot will continue.
The military telegram channel Deep State writes that the enemy is taking advantage of worsening weather conditions and fog. The Russians have been rotating in recent days. Enemy groups walked from Krasnogorivka and back, as if on parade. The Russians began to strengthen their positions on the waste heap and are trying to gain a foothold close to the Avdiivka coke plant. It is its loss, and not the waste heap, that will create serious problems for the entire garrison of the city. A defeat by an FPV drone against a stick with a rag, unfortunately, does not in any way affect our successes. A difficult situation remains along the entire front line due to the widespread involvement of infantry formations, equipment, and drones by the enemy. The weather makes its own adjustments, but they are not in our favor now. It is important to approach information sensibly and not give in to panic because of the fighting in Avdiivka. This is a war and it's normal when there are maneuvers. It's bad when they don't, writes Deep State. At the same time, as far as one can understand, the Russian command in the Avdiivka direction has somewhat revised its methodology for organizing and conducting combat operations. From now on, the enemy does this, so to speak, cyclically, alternately activating either the northern or the southern strike tactical groups, abandoning an all-out continuous offensive, as was the case at the initial stage of this operation. In other words, the command of the enemy troops organizes and conducts offensive actions in the Avdiivka area, where it can and where it believes that it can achieve success in the shortest possible time and with the use of minimal effort. It is from these considerations that one should proceed when assessing the actions of the enemy command. In general, it should be noted that, in contrast to the fairly widespread thesis that the enemy doesn't learn anything, this is not entirely true. Over the past 6 months, Russians have completely learned to correlate the volume and size of their wishes with their real abilities. The superiority and underestimation of the Ukrainian armed forces in their operational planning, and most alarmingly, in the current actions and reactions of their command, are obviously gradually becoming a thing of the past. In this sense, the rapid and prompt change in approaches and principles in the organization and conduct of combat operations on the part of the Russian command in the Avdiivka direction is a vivid illustration. After it was not possible to break the Ukrainian defense quickly with one powerful blow, the enemy very quickly began to change it to clearly calibrated and secured attacks and assault actions in individual areas and directions. Most likely, after the enemy breaks through to the railway northwest of Avdiivka and captures the Terikon position, the enemy command will try to revive the southern front. Otherwise, all these sacrifices of the last days that the enemy suffered in this direction will turn out to be unnecessary. By and large, the fate of the Avdiivka defense region will be decided not in the north, but to the south of it, where the degree of bypass of the main positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in Avdiivka by enemy troops is much greater than in the north. In fact, they have already gone beyond the flank of the Ukrainian defense area in Avdiivka to the south, and all they have to do is break through to its rear in the Orlivka area. So, I think the conclusion in this sense is completely obvious. Another attempt to break through to the rear of the Avdiivka defense region from the south will obviously take place in the near future. The situation in the Kharkiv direction around Kupyansk is escalating. The shelling there is intensifying, and, apparently, there is a threat of expanding the geography of hostilities. Therefore, the authorities of the Kharkiv region intend to forcibly evacuate 275 children from 10 settlements in the Kupyansk district. Also, while at the level of recommendations, the regional authorities advise leaving the Barabash community. Now 8,900 people live there, including 844 children. I note that Russia is attacking towards Barabash and the Oskil River from the Lugansk region. The General Staff today reports unsuccessful enemy attacks in the Kupyansk sector in the area of Synkivka and Ivanivka. Ukrainian telegram channels write about the enemy's renewed active pressure at Liman Pershi and about the ongoing assault actions of the Russians in the Liman area in the Serebransky forestry area. Western experts record the advance of the Russians in the Liman sector in the Makiivka area. Meanwhile, Russian aircraft have not launched cruise missile attacks on Ukraine in more than a month, one of the longest pauses since the invasion began. British intelligence reports this, believing that Russia is thus replenishing its dwindling supply of these missiles in order to strike energy infrastructure in the winter. The Ukrainian authorities and military have repeatedly warned Ukrainians about this. Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Ignat said today that the Russians have recently been flying drones in small groups to gather information about the performance of Ukrainian air defenses. This allows the enemy to draw conclusions about the forces and assets that are located in a particular region and take this information into account when planning subsequent attacks. That is, some other reconnaissance function, he said. Let me remind you that Zelensky said earlier that Ukraine this winter will not only defend itself from Russian attacks on the energy infrastructure, but also respond. The enemy knows this well. First, they removed the fleet from Crimea, and now they are moving their aircraft further than our borders, the president said.
Friends, please support my channel if you like the video I provide, because making video is my full-time job. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.